but his counselors are even wiser than his. And he is the son of the old king, and in the time of the old king, the country was called the country of the wise king over the foolish country, because the king was so wise that everybody else was foolish in comparison. And that ever since he died, the kingdom has been called the wise country with the foolish king, and the guy who's going to be king has to change the name of the country back. And the only way he can do this is by submitting to a number of tests. And he goes through the first test, which he has to go into a garden where nobody can get into, because the moment anybody enters the garden, hidden forces start persecuting him and racing after him, and he just runs out of the garden in terror. And nobody has ever succeeded in getting in there. People have tried, they could never do it. It's like trying to redeem the Jewish people. Somebody gets up and says, I'm the Moshiach, a million other people immediately at him. No, you're not my Rabbi. So, by the side of the garden, the king's true son sees the statue of the old king. And since he now knows how to understand one thing from another, he understands that the old king set up this garden as a challenge, and that all you have to do to get into the garden is every time they start to persecute you, you stand by the statue of the old king, and the persecution will go away. And he does this, he gets into the garden, and then he moves the statue into the garden, and then all the ministers are able to come into the garden and walk around with no persecution. And they say, that's great, that's your first test, but just on the strength of that, you can't become the king of the country. There's one more test you have to go through. The old king left a throne, and the throne has steps, and by the side of the steps there are animals standing. It's very reminiscent of the throne of Solomon, which is described in Chronicles and in the Midrashim. And from this throne there are pathways leading out all over the world, and there are animals, and anybody who tries to get there is in danger of his life. And we need to see if you can rectify this throne. And because he has the ability to understand one thing from another, he understands that he can begin to see the things that are wrong with the throne. There's a rose that is supposed to be above that's been fallen down to the bottom. There's a table that's out of place. There's a candelabrum that's out of place. And he realizes if he'll just set everything in order, everything will be right. And as he puts the thing in the right order, so all the animals begin to sing the same song, and this song is so completely enchanting, it just draws everybody into its enchantment. Now Rabbi Nachman one time said, this is quoted in the Essential Rabbi Nachman in the first chapter, the chapter of the unique charm of Rabbi Nachman. He said, as yet the world has not heard the music and the song and the dance of my Torahs. You have the words, you have the Likutei Moharan, but you don't have the music, you don't have the song, and you don't have the dance. And he describes a kind of operatic ballet where the music, the dance movement, the meaning, everything is in perfect sync. It is so breathtakingly beautiful. He said if people could hear the dance and the song of my Torahs, they would just expire with longing. The whole world would just be drawn in. And many similar sayings where the Rebbe spoke about the charismatic, enchanting draw of his Torah. And here we see in Reb Nachman himself this concept of the charisma whereby Moshiach draws people in through music. Now, for those who are familiar with Reb Nachman's Torahs, the Torah after which my institute, Zamra Institute, is named, the Torah of Song, those of you who have read my book, The Wings of the Sun, will know the absolutely central role that music has in Reb Nachman's Torah of healing. And you'll also see from The Wings of the Sun that healing was a preoccupation, I would say a central preoccupation of Reb Nachman in the last years of his life. Those years that, as Reb Nachman says in Chayei Moharan, he is forging out the pathway to Moshiach HaGoel Tzedek. When he left Breslau for Lemberg in 1807, he gave over the Torah of Azamra. And when he gave it over, he said, I'll tell you the beginning of my journey. His journey to Lemberg was to one of the centers of Jewish assimilation. Reb Nachman's way to save us from this atheism is through song, through the song of faith. His writings about song and music, the Torah of song and music and healing is central to Reb Nachman. And what is healing? Healing is tikkun. Healing is tikkun. Tikkun is healing. Healing is impossible. How can there be healing? Your car gets broken down. How can it possibly heal by itself? You've got to take it to a mechanic. Anything else breaks down, you take it to a mechanic. But the human being, the human system, the soul and the body, that can't heal from a mechanic. MD cannot heal you. He may be able to put in a band-aid. He may be able to alleviate, but the actual true spiritual healing has to be drawn down through ruach, through nigun. So here in Reb Nachman's revealed writings, we see actually the very same contours as we see in Dr. Tzvi Mark's picture of Moshiach as a musician and a healer. We have it in Likutei Moharan, we have it in Rabbi Nachman's stories. And I think this is just a tremendously beautiful, hopeful, optimistic scenario for Moshiach, that it doesn't have to be through blood and gore and swords. This is where we completely differ from those who think that the world's going to be rectified by drawing swords, by blowing people up, by killing men, women, children, innocent, wantonly, who think that the world is full of idolatry and that you have to destroy and burn up the idolatry and everybody has to be uniform. That's not what it is at all. It's about how man of his own voluntary free will gets drawn by the sweetness, by the beauty, by the melody, by the holy healing energy that's coming from the Torah. That is Moshiach, and that is the hope. And we see in our world today, we see the Kalim are with us. We see in our own lifetimes the internet, and what the internet has bred, the possibility of instant communication. You give a class, and immediately in 2 minutes it's on YouTube, it's on internet, it's visible, it's happening mamash in front of our eyes, and it will be through the melody of the tzaddikim and through the healing remedies, which are the terufim of the Torah. The medicine of the tzaddik is made up of pathways that are made up of stages and steps that the master apocrypher has to arrange one by one to bring about the homeopathic healing that spreads in the body, to make the vibrations begin to get back into the right frequencies and to spread the healing. These are the Torahs of the tzaddik, and our job is to let this music and these healing remedies be heard, the music of the Torah, the actual nigunim of the tzaddikim, and through this we will see that the light of Mashiach will spread through the world, and we will be able to greet Melech HaMashiach. We will recognize this charismatic youngster. Let us not forget that how old was Shlomo HaMelech when he came to the throne? He was 12. How old was Betzalel when he made the Mikdash? He was 8 years old, I think, or he was extraordinary young ages of the outstanding tzaddikim. And God makes chidushim. You know, we adults, we may not wish to admit it, but we have to admit and accept and understand that the young generation today are actually on a higher spiritual level than we are. They're tuned in many ways. I mean, Lahavdil, Harry Potter has set forth the understanding in many people that there are other realms than the eye sees. We've gone out of the rationalistic, materialistic philosophies of the 19th century. We're now into the 21st century, the post-New Age, and the era is extraordinarily receptive to this. We've heard of the teenagers who've made their millions on the internet. You hear about the teen hackers. I heard about, I'm in California last week reading the LA Times about an 18-year-old kid who got terrible grades, so he hacks into the school computer system, gives himself all A's, and gets into college until they wonder how this kid could have got all A's in everything. He just wasn't smart enough to give himself a few B's. But we see how smart the younger generation are. I know in Eretz Yisrael, those little children, the Cheder children, the Tinoka Shalbez Rabban of Eretz Yisrael, are the smartest guys. You cannot fool them. You cannot. You try to give them a bubba meiser. They're at you with when, how, what, where.